Yeah. Ooh, Sanat.
So what's happening in your exciting, adventure-packed world?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's just work, 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 I guess. If work's defined as something you love and defined as research and present the information in classes, then it's enjoyable. Yeah, and life is fine. How's your life?
My life is fine, yes. So is the outlook going to be a similar pattern, or do you think the pattern for you will change? You'll get back to like it was before, or some other variation?
What do you mean before? So I'm clear on what you mean. How long before?
Well, my sense is like you used to have like a research day or two or something, and then you had a fair bit of time. Well, not a fair bit, but you had time to yourself and with Sue. Is it?
Yeah.
I'm getting the sense it's a bit. The pace has changed a little bit.
Yeah, it changed with the change of management, and it changed with the management's decision to change a lot of my classes, and it changed with you know what they wanted me to focus on as far as topics were concerned. So yeah, and that all happened about the same time. And but to answer your question, I understand what you mean. Yes, it will get back. I think. At the moment, I'm struggling to get my first lesson, which is this Friday, the 1st of October, and it's a totally new class, and I need to get that finished. So that Friday is behind me. The other lesson on Friday is one of my old lessons that they've allowed me to bring back. So that just needs a bit of tweaking now and updating. So it doesn't need a lot of work, but I've still got to work on it before Friday morning. But at least the other one that I'm working on, I've been working on it now for a day and a half, and just a few moments ago, I said to Sue that I'm going to start all over again. I've got enough stuff there to occupy the time for the class and so on, but I said it's not me. I really don't feel I've done a good job here for myself. And so when we finished our conversation, I'm going to start from scratch again on Fridays and sort of move with what I feel is the right thing. And I've got an idea of what that is now, but it only came to me quite recently during the day.
So have they started to promote that session then? Is that out there now in terms of trying to get enrollments for it and so on?
Yes, it is out there. Oh yes, yeah, it's out there. And you see, one of the things that we had to do for the whole of October with all the new lessons was create descriptions and give it a 3-word summary of what the lesson is going to be about. 3 points, as well as a description of at least 300 words. Okay. And so to do that, I had to do research for those new topics. I had no idea. Yeah, I couldn't just write a description. And then so when I did that research, I earmarked where I'd researched it and so on. So when I go back to actually creating the content and the slides, I knew I would know where I got that from. So, and I've never done that before historically. And I've always tried to cut the corners and do things sort of generically. This can cover that class and this class and the other class, whereas they don't want that anymore. They want each class to have a unique description. So I think once I've created, once I'm up to scratch, because the way that I'm able to work when, assuming that brand new classes like the one I'm doing on Friday, when those sort of classes for October are taken care of, then I've just got the sort of research for 5 classes for each week that's coming up, a new content. but it's
Yep.
still focused on, and I can do that with 1 week in advance. I can do it properly because I've got the afternoons and evenings to do that. Okay, so and then I discipline myself to answer your question to do for other things. So they want us to do a help or do not our own marketing, but they say because we're getting judged by the attendance, we should market for ourselves as well. They do marketing as well, okay, and so I've sort of sat down. I spent a whole evening this week looking at what I should do, and so I've been marketing my classes with my links. I've only done 1 or 2 at the moment. As they about to come up in a day or two's time, then I'd market them on Facebook and with the link on Facebook. And so yeah, we'll see. And they're marketing so that on Facebook as well. So I'll market on Facebook. I'll probably market on Instagram as well. And so I'm getting sort of an all-round, almost like I'm going into another profession.
What sort of following do they have?
Well, they talk about the people that come to their website are about 1 million people. Okay.
Wow. Okay, that's pretty substantial then. Yeah.
So, but those 1 million people, they can just measure, obviously, from analytics, I guess, from Google or something like that. That people that are opening the website, they're not necessarily looking at classes or even taking classes, but there's a fair number, and they do a lot of marketing in different Get Set Up groups on Facebook. So you get a photography group on Facebook, and you get this book and that book, and you've got an Australian Facebook page, and so on, and but they're all groups. So in other words, people have to join those groups. So, not everybody, but there is a common group where people don't have to join, called the Get Set Up community.
Yeah.
And that's I don't know. That's got I can't recall now quite, but about 2,000 people coming and going on that one because they don't have to join, so they just click on it and go and read. So I'm allowed to post there as well. So. And then people now can join from Facebook directly into a class without registering on Get Set Up.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So that's a new thing that's now just started last week. And so...
It's not going to open the door for the bombers again, is it?
Well, who knows? But it's the way they've corrected that is that they go straight into a room that gets set up as creative. They call it the lounge. Okay. And they told us yesterday that the intention is to have people come and go into the lounge, and if they haven't signed up, they can't go into the class. Okay. But they can watch from the lounge. Okay, like they used to be able to watch from Facebook. Now no longer being streamed on Facebook and YouTube, which it was. Okay, it only now gets streamed into the lounge. So they're now encouraged from Facebook to go into the lounge and watch. And they said in due course, probably early next year or something, they will then only allow people to watch for maybe 10 minutes and then say, give us your email address, then you can watch the rest of the class. Something like that. So it's part of their strategy. But we're getting people, we don't know that they're there. We don't know that they're watching as a guide. So we only know about the people who come into our class.
And do they know how many people are in the lounge?
Yes, they do.
Okay.
Yeah. So they've now got, apparently, a mechanism to count the total number of people who watched your class, including the people that are in the lounge now as well. And because
do they share that with you?
Well, they're going to. Okay. In fact, it's going to be a management one-on-one discussion once a month, so that if we're not getting the the attendance in any one particular class, they're going to ask us to stop that class and replace it, or just can it all together and have one less class. Okay, and so we'll wait and see. I spoke to one of the guides in America, one of the older guides, older as in, well, in both ways, age and in how long they've been at GetSetUp, and she had all her classes canned.
All of them?
A lot, the whole lot, and she wasn't given advanced warning. Okay, and then when obviously she wasn't a happy chappy, and they then gave her an internal job in GetSetUp at $15 an hour, working on insignificant sort of stuff. So she's really not happy, and so that's where they're at. And she says whatever I'm talking about is happening in Australia and India is happening in America, but with different management. Okay. So
it's quite a shame, really, because like when you first joined, it really did exhibit a lot of those principles that we'd been talking about, in terms of a different way of conducting business. So but they just seem to be, in some respects, just swinging back to the old traditional way, don't they? So
I think I'm going to sort of reserve my comment on that one for a few months. Okay, I want to, they've employed a couple of new people. If I just ignore the engineers they've employed, but just other types of people. They're straight out of varsity, having got a degree in marketing or social media or something like that. Okay, so and I guess I can see they want the latest information about, I guess, that they can put into their company.
And that's good and fine and positive and so on. But it's like any organisation, you've got to provide a clear direction and style and standards, and if they're not providing that, and they're just defaulting back to metrics that are driven by, participation and money and those sorts of things, well, where does the people first?
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. I agree. I think the reason I want to just give it time is because I don't know what really the characters are of the senior management. I know who the founders are, and they're still involved. Okay. And I'm not sure how much they've been influenced from their original intake to where it is now because of the new management they've brought in underneath them. Okay. And I'm not sure whether they're going to give them enough rope, the saying goes.
Are they feeling a little bit threatened, do you think, with, lockdowns, potentially coming to an end within, months, around the world, so.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I was told by this person in America that she found out on LinkedIn that there are 2 big contracts for GetSetUp in Australia. And we're starting to see sort of a regular dribble now of people coming into our classes from Australia. So we could land up. That's again why I want to give it time. Totally our own sort of Australian management, and the people that are currently, overseeing Australia are Indians. Okay, and I think eventually we will have our own management here. Okay. And
I do at one level personally sort of wonder about the logic of geographical communities, because I think that's one of the things that has changed, like we are a global community, so it's more, borders aren't that relevant, in my opinion, and it's more about, communities of interest, so, but anyway, I guess time will tell, so.
Yeah, I think that's a difficult one because, number one, you've got time zones that are dramatically different between us and Americans, okay? And then you've also got language problems. Okay, India, most of their, or not, I don't know about most. Let's just call it a lot. A lot of their classes are in local languages. Okay, and they're now, trying to teach French, and I guess that wants to open up. Someone else is looking at the Chinese market. So I think there are a lot that go into that geographical, and also the interests. I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, in my herb class today, for an example, okay, I had a really successful class, and I had Australians and Indians in it, basically. And there were some Americans too, but the vast majority were Indians. And they were saying to me, the herbs you mentioned are not our herbs here in India, okay? Yeah. We feel strongly that we've got to be eating our own herbs that are grown in our own country, and historically have a significance on our culture and so on.
Yeah, I get that.
And I accept that, okay? That comes back to, we need to have communities. We need to be aiming at certain markets, okay? And catering for those particular markets. So yeah. I'm convinced that, and so is this lady in America, when we had a long discussion on marketing, and she said, in America, you can't get enough classes about, and she's recommending that we do it here in Australia. What do you call them in Australia here? We call them braais in South Africa. Barbies, you call them here. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Barbies and Barbie recipes, and and all the things that go with the side of Barbies. Now, in India nobody would attend that. Okay. So yeah, it's difficult for us guys. It's difficult, I guess, for the management also. They've made some decisions. And
yeah, I guess so. But I mean, I wouldn't underestimate.
You're still getting it for free, so that's a great.
But I wouldn't underestimate your creative abilities either. I sort of think that, sure, there's all of that sort of, vanilla stuff, but I think there's a few other flavors that you can add to it, and I think you've already proven that, with your spirituality one and the, getting into business. I mean, they've all been quite successful, so.
Yeah. So we wait and we see how things actually evolve.
Isn't it funny, because I know a couple of people who've worked in or who have or are working in universities, and in many respects, universities are really badly managed. And you sort of say stuff, well, how does that happen? Because they're places of learning and and all of that, and they just they're not practicing what they're preaching. So
Yeah.
That's fascinating. No, but I think it's good. It's good, and I think from what you've described, there's lots of opportunity there, isn't there? So
but as I said right at the start of it was, I'm happy.
Okay. Yeah.
And
well, that's got to be your number one measure, doesn't it? So.
Yeah, it is definitely, and I just feel that I'm going down an avenue or a direction that really suits me, and I know that the learners are getting it for free, and I am giving the best quality that I can possibly put together, and I bring in my flavor, and I guess there's some sort of energy that connects with those learners as well, with every guy.
Of course, yeah.
And so there's that sort of those more subtle things, which is great. And they're also encouraging us now to interact with our learners on the Facebook site. Okay.
Oh, really? Okay.
So I've already had my first 2 requests because I only told them about it yesterday, and before yesterday was up 2 of the people in class. The one was from my business class, and the other one was from my herb class. The one's a doctor, okay, and he follows me religiously with all my classes, and yeah, he said some very complimentary things. And he's also found me on the doctor has found me on Pinterest as well. So he seems to be following my lead. Everything I say, he seems to do. And
Oh, well, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know where it leads to, but it's what is now. Okay.
Well, it's like anything. I mean, you approach it as a possibility and an opportunity, and just as you say, go with the flow and see where it takes you. So
Yeah.
Well, that's exciting. That's good.
Yeah, it is.
I know how hard you fought yourself to battle some of your initial instincts around, fighting it or resisting it. So you've done very well. You've done very well. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Anyway, and what about you, man? What are you doing?
Oh, just doing what I'm doing.
Any more from your book that you're busy listening to?
It just is continuing to steadily build on the theme. Like he's in the macro realm at the moment, and there's lots of things that he talks about. That when he talks about it, you say, of course that must be true.
Yeah.
But until he talks about it, like you don't even think about it. Because like today, for example, he was talking. He's been leading up to going further and further out. So he's sort of saying, like our relationship with our planet, and then within our solar system. And then he's spent a fair bit of time talking about the sun, and our relationship with the sun, and how you can perceive things from the sun's perspective, and how you can perceive things as a flat. That's my word, not his. Like a flat perspective, we just say, oh, it's just rocks and water and burning hydrogen or whatever. He says, but you can also look at it from a perspective that it's a living entity in its own right, And he keeps on talking about, the influence. So obviously the influence of the sun is fairly obvious in terms of what it means to us, but it in terms of, like life and all of the things that it's responsible for.
Yeah.
But now he's talking about building on this web of influence, and now he's talking about within the galaxy and between galaxies, and he's sort of saying, well, how is it, should we not assume that the life as we see it on the planet at the moment, the origins of that could be well outside of the galaxy and the influences of other galaxies as well. So why would we assume that the influence was only local? Why shouldn't we be assuming that the influence is not on a much, much grander scale? And you say, well, of course that's true. Like, how can it not be? Why do we sort of have this isolationist view that it's only about here, or it's only about the planet, or it's only about the Earth and the Moon, or it's only about. Clearly the influence goes out, well beyond our ability to comprehend, So
Yeah.
And he also talks about, looking at things from a spiritual perspective as well. So that when you look at the planet from a spiritual perspective, You know, once again, it has a completely different dimension and definition than if you look at it. He often refers to the label he attaches it to is from a scientific perspective, which is sort of breaking things down to its elements, you know.
Mm. Mm.
And he sort of says, well, you know, science can't break down spirituality. You just can't break it down to its elements because, you know, it's just not possible from a scientific perspective, because they always want proof and you know, being able to put labels on the individual components and all of that sort of thing, you know. So
Do you agree with it?
to an extent, yeah. I think traditional science has always been about, you know, is it observable and can you perform experiments on it that are repeatable and all of those, that type of rigor. And I don't feel that a number of dimensions of spirituality can be subject to that sort of approach.
But I mean, with the new science of, say, quantum physics, you know, we're looking at things differently, okay? And I think that there's, you know, yeah, that science and spirituality are basically in the future, but certainly in my perception now, they're one and the same thing.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure. And both evolving as well. Very much so. Yeah.
Yeah, I think even both, you know, means a separation. I think that everything is or the single aspect of is evolving, and both the physical or which was analyzed historically by the old science, but the new science now shows that that we actually won. So that one is evolving. So what we used to call the spiritual is now evolving. What we used to call the physical is evolving, and so
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I mean, I mean, the way I'd encapsulate it is probably our awareness is increasing, you know. So
yeah. What do you see as you know, this phrase that we've grown up with, and that is as use my own words, as above, so below. Okay. Okay. What do you make of a phrase like that?
Well, I mean, I think historically it sort of came out of the view that, you know, that above, you know, bit of an assumption, a little bit of an assumption on my part, but above was basically that heaven was up there.
Yeah.
You know, whereas that view has evolved.
But it also implied, didn't it, that whatever law there was up there means that same law is here down below. And as above, so below. Yeah, maybe also as within, as without. Okay. So it's all just something. Okay, and whether, let's just call it, it's all just energy. It's all just spirituality. Okay. And I know certain people might say, and those certain people are just in my head, might say, but where's God in that picture? Okay, that is God.
Okay. Well, that's right, and that's the first, you know, unprovoked response that I would have is well, ask yourself, well, where is God not in that picture?
Yeah.
You know, so the underpinning assumption of the question, like the question's just flawed, you know. So yeah.
Yeah.
But the fascinating thing, you know, not the fascinating. One of the fascinating aspects for me though is that as I stretch my mind around, you know, these more far-flung influences on us, and I become more conscious of them, as the level of amazement just continues to rise.
Yeah.
Wonder and awe, it just explodes. You know,
Right. Right.
it's a delightful experience to contemplate. You know,
Right.
these other aspects. So, yeah.
Right. Right. Right.
Mm. So yeah, and no matter which direction you look
Mm.
and how far you look, you know, it continues to expand.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm. And then sometimes I'll sort of stop and reflect on you know, those awakened people, you know, and just wonder at their perspectives on this life, you know.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
As to how broad and open and incredibly vibrant and alive those perspectives must be, you know, as they've travelled that path, or as their awareness has increased, you know. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the fascinating thing is, you know, it's like, well, even Einstein, you know, and you'd always hear the term, you know, about, you know, time and space are all relative, and it's true, you know, that you start to you know, as you consciously contemplate, you know, ideas of, like, you know, the influence of galaxies at distances beyond our ability to comprehend on our day-to-day life. You know, it's something that has you thinking in many directions, that's for sure. You know, so
Yeah. Yeah. It does.
and it and I don't know about you, but it just powerfully propels the incredible magnificence of God, you know, when you start to contemplate some of those other dimensions like that, you know. So
Absolutely. Absolutely.
mm,
Yeah.
mm.
Yeah. And you realize you don't want to describe God.
Well, we don't have the ability to, and
Yeah.
I'm not sure why we want to anyway. But mm,
Yeah. Well, the mystics, you know, and the spiritual people talk about um, like the 12 energies
mm,
uh, that make up God or come out of God, and
mm,
the number of colors that come out of God, and the number of sounds, and all that sort of make up the universe, but point back to God. And
mm,
you know, that is just, you know, when you contemplate that, or you just look at um, the significance of color, okay,
mm, mm,
it, it's such a blessing and
mm,
profound for a simple person like myself just to look out as I do so often during the day and walk in my garden,
mm,
which is such a blessing and so colorful too.
mm,
In that now while I'm talking to you, and yeah, it's just marvelous, and that's just
mm,
one aspect. Okay.
mm. And I've read on several occasions from different authors too, you know, through the activation of the pineal gland,
Mm.
is that through meditations with an activation in that area, is you can actually see colors beyond what you can actually see with your eyes, you know. So, and I mean, isn't that fascinating?
You know, I've put the pineal gland, just to digress for a minute. I put the
Mm,
pineal gland sort of like on hold because
mm,
I researched it, you know, as you a couple of,
mm,
was it months now? I don't know, ago, and I got to just the same old, you know,
mm, mm,
and it just wasn't something that I was expecting to find. It was something just, you know, that was different. And now you mentioned something now which is different. Okay,
mm,
um,
mm,
perhaps seeing colors that we can't see with our eye. Now
mm,
that really interests me. I think that's it's a hell of a statement, and I, without a doubt, know that you got it from good source. Okay.
Well, there's that, but the other thing too, even just from a traditional science perspective, you know, and it's sort of available to us freely now because of the space station. But do they just take photos of the Earth, and they take them in the infrared spectrum, and they take them in the X-ray spectrum, and they take them in all sorts of different spectrums?
Yeah.
All pointed at the same place, but the images are just so totally different, you know. So,
Right. Yeah.
So it just reminds us just to how narrow, you know, what we think seeing can actually be.
How narrow our senses are.
Yeah,
without a doubt. I mean, yeah, and they're using some of that. I was reading, you know, I think I mentioned it in our last meeting. You know, the sound, how the Secret Services now are using sound that we can't hear to not only eavesdrop but also to kill people with. Yeah. So and then there's absolutely no sign of any reason of death. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's interesting too.
It never ceases to amaze me though, you know, like that when these technologies become available, is there is still this human, I assume it's just a human tendency to want to use it as a weapon. You know, like why is that the default? Like, why is that? Why isn't the default is like, how can this benefit humanity? Like, I just personally struggle with, like, but why? You know, why would you even bother? You know, like.
Because they are who they are. They are satanic, okay? And they want self-glorification or self-monetization. But they could also want to control the world if you happen to be a Chinese leader. Well, I guess a lot of different leaders, but particularly them. There seems to be such a lot of activity at the moment now with the Chinese leaders clamping down on China, on their own citizens.
Yeah.
And all those around as well. Yeah.
Be interesting to see if there's emerges some level of discussion or even debate around, you know, well, what is freedom anyway? You know, because at the moment it seems to be, is it red or is it blue? You know. And I'd probably argue that it's neither. You know, because one of the things that sort of struck me, for example, you know, and this is a while ago now, but like the very first time I went to the US and saw the patriotic fervor, you know, like American flags on cars and on front lawns and stickers on laptops, and everywhere you go, it's just flags, you know. And it sort of like the behaviour struck me. It really struck me quite poignantly. Well, how is that any different than, you know, well, at the time, you know, with all the flag waving that was going on in Iran, you know?
Yeah.
How is it any different, you know?
Right.
Different colours, that's all. Same behaviour, basically.
Yeah. So what does that lead you to be thinking about?
Well, I mean, you know, it's a little bit like, you know, we discussed on Sunday, you know, that, you know, these emotions of hate or envy or fear or whatever, you know, the task is just to dissolve them, you know, not to feed them, because if you feed them, then it's always, there's an enemy over there that needs to be defeated.
Yeah.
And you know, when you start talking about, you know, oneness, you know, whether it's, you know, one community or one state or one nation or one planet, you know, you're still drawing lines.
Mm.
You know? So when you think about oneness with no lines, well, that's a different perspective altogether.
Yeah. Do you start the oneness with people who are feeling it? Let's say like Elytra people, for example, and do perhaps feel the same, bringing them together, because there's still a them and us situation.
Well, I mean, they for their own reasons, were very disciplined about it, because if someone wasn't 100% with us, then you must be against us, So, and it's sort of funny. I think I might have mentioned to you once or twice before. My younger brother, sort of not got involved with, but there was this organisation set up on the Sunshine Coast, which is about an hour and a half north of Brisbane, called the Sunshine Coast Temple of Satan.
Okay.
And the reason that they set themselves up was from a political perspective, in response to the federal government's was it the Religious Discrimination Bill? So an act of parliament that has been proposed, and basically the essence of the bill is that religious organisations would get favourable treatment, so they could, for example, discriminate against other people or organisations within the context of the existing law, because of the fact that they were a religious organisation.
Right.
And so the response from the small group of thinkers up on the Sunshine Coast was, as well, we'll just create Sunshine Coast Temple of Satan and have those very same principles that they're articulating for religious organisations to apply to us as a means of demonstrating how stupid this law is. So, like, they're sort of saying, the religious denominations should have access to all of the schools, to preach their religion. And they're saying, well, so should we, because we're a religious organisation. The fact that we worship Satan is beside the point.
Yeah.
and then they've got a Facebook page and stuff, and the stuff on that Facebook page, it just demonstrates the worst of human behaviour in every respect. It's like, my God's better than your God, and you don't know what you're talking about because I'm right and you're wrong, and rah, rah, rah. and then it's like, so you want to, so the question to the government is, so you want to create this legislation for all of these so-called religions to enable them to conduct any sort of behaviour that they see fit in the name of the righteousness of my God, however I define them.
Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah.
And ironically, the guy who's running up there is actually a South African guy too. So he's, but it's so funny though,
yeah.
But it's so serious too. And like they, like, to give you an example, they were having a lot of pushback from, because one of the means that they tried to demonstrate the stupidity of what's been proposed was exactly that issue about schools, access to schools. And so they decided to lodge a Freedom of Information request with the Queensland Department of Education, just to see, what they'd been writing about them. And they expected to get, like maybe 20 or 30 documents. and the government came back with as a result of the Freedom of Information request, and said, oh no, there's something like 10,000 documents have been written about you people. And this is just like a couple of blokes who, got together, over a barbecue one afternoon and said, look how stupid this is, let's do something about it, And
how, but I mean, with their Facebook page, they obviously bring other people who actually do worship Satan. Okay.
Oh, there's the few of the unhinged get in there pretty quickly as well. Yeah, absolutely. But the whole, but they keep it quite sort of light-hearted, but there's like it's got a serious edge. So they when they're asked directly, like, so are you promoting evil and violence and all that sort of stuff? I said, no, absolutely not. Absolutely not. What this is trying to demonstrate is if you're going to enact legislation which says, that someone who deems themselves to be a religious organisation can basically not be subject to the law of the land on the basis of their declaration, then where does that take you? So so I thought it was quite a masterful way of demonstrating the stupidity of the point that they were articulating. So
absolutely. It's so interesting. Even more so.
But I laugh with some of the language they use too, because like some of and it's probably not foreign to you, but some of the South African slang, like, because they'll get someone on there giving them a great big lecture and preaching at them about how evil they are and how dangerous they are and all this sort of thing, and that you deserve to be shot and all this sort of stuff, and their response would be, well, isn't that a lovely little what did I say? What a lovely little flog that Christian is. So they're getting all of the sorts of behaviour directed at them in the name of righteousness and good religion.
Yeah.
Which when you look at it for what it is, it's like, well, that's just bloody satanic behaviour. That's all that is.
Yes. Yeah.
It's very, very clever. It's very clever because a lot of these organisations do not know how to deal with it because, as part of their smart, approach in addressing the stupidity of this is they'll go to some of these, Christian lobby groups and say, we need to sit down and talk, because we need to make sure that this legislation is enacted properly so that we can all get maximum benefit out of it,
Yeah.
And it's like, well, no, we're going to get maximum benefit out of it because we're the good guys. You're the bad guys, so you can't get any benefit out of this. It's like, who defines who's good and who's bad? So
who does that? Even in our own minds today, hey?
Yeah. So it's very, very clever. I think it's a stroke of genius, personally. But
it sounds like it.
but the reactions that they've both got from governments of all persuasions and that, it's just because I've even seen interviews where, like, the leader of or not the leader of the opposition, but like a local opposition party politician up on the Sunshine Coast, making all these outlandish statements about, these people are symptomatic of what Lady Gaga is to the world and stuff like this. And it's like, hang on a minute, where did that come from? Like, who even mentioned Lady Gaga? So all of these things just come tumbling into it, and you're thinking, goodness gracious, But
yeah, she's associated with that sort of satanic behaviour.
Well, probably is, no doubt, but you just sort of think to yourself, well, but it immediately begs the question, well, why do these organisations need special privileges, So
yeah.
And who decides who gets them and who doesn't get them, So
right.
Because you talk to any fanatic, they'll always say that they're right, aren't they?
Yeah.
And doing it for their God.
Or they are right, they're a fanatic.
Yeah, well, that's right. But you sort of see two armies lining up against each other, and they're both praying to God, for their support, and then,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's see who God decides to support today.
Or probably even more relevant, well, why don't we just pray to our gods and let them sort it out?
But it's it's the same God.
Yeah, you know, but yeah. So, but it does just show a lot about where different levels of awareness are at, I guess, and the behaviour that spurns from that too, isn't it? So.
Yeah, and how governments they pass laws often just with the motivation of one parliamentarian or something, you know.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, some deal is done in a back room somewhere over something,
yeah,
and to appease them, they say, "Oh, you know, we'll give them that," you know. So,
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
no, it's fascinating, but I thought it was a masterful strategy though, because it it sort of slayed them with their own argument. So,
Yeah.
you know, so
Yeah.
anyway,
Interesting. Yeah.
it is fascinating, but it's something that we should always encourage. And I know you're doing it through your Get Set Up classes, but just encourage people to broaden their perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. The spirituality class is so interesting like that. I keep on saying it, you know. And
Yeah.
I have a rule in my class, and I tell them, okay, you're not allowed to say we or us. You can only say I.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so you take ownership of what you're saying because of your experience or your belief. Okay, that's working in your life. Okay, it's so difficult for some of them.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? You know, it's safe to hide in the crowd, isn't it? You know. So,
Yes, always. Yeah. Our belief is no. You got to say my belief is. Okay, and I pull them up. You know, you can imagine how I do. I do pull them up, and the others all smile. You can. Yeah.
I think again, once again, I think it's perfect because, you know, how many times do you see people saying things, you know, without really a deep ownership of it, you know?
Yeah. It's just a philosophy and something they've been brought up in, and they indiscriminately believe in it. Yeah. So as soon as they say I, it's a lot more difficult.
There's a guy who's a little bit like that, not in a negative sense, though. He's a bit like that, though, on that gratefulness forum that I participate around the edges on, and he's a Quaker, and you know, and they have quite specific ways that they conduct their worship and those sorts of things, and how the community operates, you know, and it's exactly that language, you know, we this, you know, we that, you know, our this, our that.
Right. Yeah.
And I sort of contrast it to and not that I sort of debated openly in the forum or anything, but I just contrast it to anything that I post is always exactly as you say. It's my experience. This, that,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And there's just chalk and cheese, you know. But
but
I don't think some people pick up the nuance as much, you know.
Yeah.
And I think for some people it's also a means of trying to give credibility to their point of view.
Yeah.
If it's someone other than me saying this, then it adds to my credibility, you know. So,
Yeah.
It is interesting, but that's going to be part of the ongoing evolution, isn't it? You know, that the more and more we bring it back to I, then the more I think the I will turn into the collective we.
Yeah.
You know, that oneness.
Yes. Yeah.
And the less need for, you know, well, there will be no need for fragmentation of groups or interests or anything like that, you know, because everything's connected.
Yeah.
Beyond our wildest imagination.
Yeah.
Well, I should probably let you go and do some of your homework, which just sounds like you've got to do tonight. So, yeah.
It's a good place. Yeah, it's a good place. Yeah. So, yeah, if not before, we'll see you on Sunday.
You certainly will. Certainly will.
Great.
Okay.
Thanks again, man. Thanks.
No worries.
Thanks for your time, and it's always so great.
No, likewise. Likewise. Okay.
Yeah.
Talk to you soon. Bye now.
Bye.